Hello, everyone. When you think of the absolute worst husband in mythology, one name probably springs to mind immediately: Zeus, the king of the gods, a notorious philanderer, a shapeshifter who couldn't keep it in his divine pants. His wife Hera suffered endless humiliations, a cosmic soap opera of infidelity and revenge, her fury legendary, her pain a constant undercurrent. But what if I told you Zeus, for all his colossal failings, isn't actually the worst? What if the depths of marital depravity plunge far, far deeper than mere infidelity into realms of chilling cruelty, calculated betrayal, and soul-crushing neglect? What if there are husbands whose actions make Zeus's countless affairs look like a minor spat, a fleeting moment of weakness compared to an... Today, we're not just discussing bad behavior, we're diving into the shadowy, brutal corners of ancient myths to unearth the top 5 worst husbands in all of mythology. Prepare yourselves, because the stories we're about to uncover aren't just about simple betrayal. They're about sacrifice, manipulation, abandonment, and a cruelty so profound it reshapes destinies, ignites... Zeus, he might just be a walk in the park compared to these titans of terrible matrimony. Let's not waste another second. Brace yourselves, because our countdown begins now. Starting our list at number 5, we journey into the treacherous waters of Greek mythology to encounter a name synonymous with heroic quest, yet stained forever by an act of abject marital betrayal: Jason of the Argonauts. You know his legend: the Golden Fleece, a perilous voyage across unknown seas, the triumph against monstrous guardians, and a vengeful king. But behind every hero's glory often lies a forgotten, broken heart. And in Jason's case, that heart belonged to Medea. Medea, a sorceress of immense power, a princess of Colchis, fell madly, obsessively in love with Jason. Her devotion was fierce, absolute, and utterly terrifying. For him she committed unspeakable, horrifying acts. She betrayed her own father, King Aphates, helping Jason steal the fabled Golden Fleece. And to ensure their escape from Colchis, she even dismembered her own brother, Apsyrtus, scattering his body parts across the waves to delay their pursuers as her grief. A chilling, desperate devotion. Indeed, she used her dark, potent magic to ensure Jason's victory, to secure his quest, to make him a legend. With her cunning, she tricked Peleus's daughters into killing their own father, believing they were restoring his youth, paving Jason's path to the throne of Iolcus. She bore him children, sons whose lives were inextricably intertwined with theirs, forged in blood, ambition, and the dangerous currents of her magic. She was not merely a wife. She was his co-conspirator, his enabler, his shield, his very architect of triumph against a hostile, unforgiving world. But when a hero achieves his quest, when the dust of adventure settles and the clamor of acclaim fades, sometimes the tools he used, no matter how vital, become an inconvenience. Jason, safely back in Iolcus, or later, ensconced in the relative calm of Corinth, began to see Medea not as his salvation, his indispensable partner, but as an exotic, dangerous barbarian. Her fierce loyalty, her potent, untamed magic, once his greatest assets, suddenly became liabilities in the sophisticated political landscape of a Greek city. State he was offered a new bride, Glaus, the young, beautiful, and politically expedient daughter of King Creon of Corinth. A marriage of convenience, a path to further power, respectability, and a legitimate... And Jason, with the moral compass of a broken arrow, blinded by ambition and callous self-interest, accepted. He cast Medea aside, not just divorced her in a formal sense, but utterly abandoned her and their children, justifying it with hollow, self-serving words. He claimed it was for the children's future, for social advancement, for a better life he could not provide with a foreign sorceress. To be used, exploited, discarded like a broken tool, and then gaslit, told it was for your own good, a necessary step for his own glory. This wasn't merely infidelity, the kind Zeus practiced with casual, lust-driven disregard. No, this was a calculated, heartless discarding of a woman who had sacrificed everything: family, homeland, innocence, even her own. Zeus's conquests might leave Hera furious, her divine wrath echoing across Olympus, but they rarely left his paramours utterly broken and destitute, their very existence invalidated by his cold calculation. Jason didn't just cheat, he annihilated Medea's world and then offered her flimsy, hypocritical excuses as a parting gift. A final insult, the tragic culmination, as many of you might know, was Medea's horrific, soul-shattering revenge, the murder of Glos, King Creon, and most agonizingly, her own innocent children with Jason, a mother's unthinkable act born from an unendurable, all-consuming agony fueled by a husband's unbearable betrayal. Jason's actions didn't just cause a marital rift. They ignited a cataclysm that consumed his entire family, reducing his hard-won glory to ashes and leaving him forever haunted by the specter of his own colossal, self-inflicted loss. His abandonment wasn't a momentary lapse of judgment. It was a soul-crushing treachery that led to an inferno of vengeance, a conflagration that obliterated everything he supposedly held dear, for this cold, calculated abandonment, for the utter disregard of a woman who gave him everything, who literally made him. Jason earns his ignominious place on our list. His betrayal was not just of a wife, but of a shared, blood-soaked destiny, making him a truly despicable figure. Coming in at number 4, we journey back to the war-torn plains of Greek mythology to encounter a king whose name echoes with the clang of battle, the cries of heroes, and the bitter taste of family feuds. Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, leader of the Achaean forces in the Trojan War. Now Zeus might be a philanderer of epic proportions, a serial seducer, but he rarely, if ever, directly ordered the sacrifice of his own legitimate, beloved child. Agamemnon, however, did just that, with a chilling resolve that eclipses any of Zeus's impulsive passions. The stage is set for a monumental conflict. The Greek fleet, 1,000 ships strong, assembled at Aulis, bristling with warrior might, ready to sail for Troy and reclaim Helen. But the winds, alas, are still. Artemis, the virgin goddess of the hunt, offended by Agamemnon's hubris. Perhaps he boasted of his hunting prowess, or more grievously, killed one of her sacred stags. Faye demands a blood price. The seer Calchas delivers the chilling, undeniable prophecy. Only the sacrifice of Agamemnon's eldest daughter, the beautiful, innocent Iphigenia, will appease the furious goddess and grant fair winds for the monumental journey. Imagine the horror. A father faced with an unthinkable choice, a divine ultimatum. Most men, most fathers would recoil, defy the gods, search desperately for another way. But Agamemnon, blinded by ambition, by the allure of glory in Troy, by the immense pressure of 1,000 waiting ships and the clamor of 1,000 impatient warriors, made his decision. A decision that would forever damn him. He chose war over family, renown over humanity, a legendary campaign over the life of his own flesh and blood. He sent for Iphigenia, luring her to Aulis under the monstrous pretense of marrying her to the great hero Achilles, promising a glorious union to mask a sacrificial altar. His proud, formidable wife, Clytemnestra, was kept entirely in the dark, believing her daughter was destined for a wedding, not a brutal slaughter. When the terrible truth was finally revealed, it was Clytemnestra's frantic pleas, her heartbroken screams, her desperate struggles fell on deaf ears. Agamemnon, rigid in his kingly resolve, unyielding in his pursuit of glory, allowed Iphigenia to be led to the altar, a lamb to the slaughter, her innocence shattered by her own father's cold hand. Whether Artemis truly spared Iphigenia at the last moment, whisking her away to Taurus and replacing her with a deer, is almost beside the point for Clytemnestra. For her daughter was gone, murdered by her own father, her husband, for the sake of a fleeting breeze and a distant, glittering war. The trauma was absolute, unforgivable. Zeus's infidelities, while infuriating and deeply hurtful, were often born of impulse or passionate, albeit twisted, desire. Agamemnon's act, however, was a cold, calculated decision, a strategic sacrifice of his own flesh and blood, a betrayal of the deepest marital and parental trust imaginable. He didn't just cheat on Clytemnestra. He violated the very sanctity of their family, extinguishing the life of their innocent child for a martial quest, plunging her into an abyss of grief and rage. The pain, the unimaginable sorrow, and the burning, vengeful fury that festered in Clytemnestra for 10 long years while Agamemnon was at Troy was a poison that consumed her soul, transforming her into an instrument of retribution. And the climax. A decade later, Agamemnon returns triumphant from Troy, bringing with him the Trojan Princess Cassandra as a war prize. Another open wound, another unforgivable insult to his queen's enduring agony. He believes all is forgiven, all forgotten, his glory overshadowing his past sins. But Clytemnestra, a woman forged in sorrow and vengeance, with her lover, Aegisthus, she orchestrated his brutal, meticulously planned murder in his own bath. An eye for an eye, a life for a life. The fall of Agamemnon wasn't just a king's demise. It was the chilling, inevitable consequence of a husband's unforgivable sin, a familial bloodbath ignited by a singular, atrocious act of child sacrifice. He sacrificed his daughter for glory, and in return lost his life, his throne, and his legacy to his wife's righteous, unyielding fury. His self-serving cruelty, far beyond mere wandering affections, solidifies his place as one of mythology's most reprehensible husbands. At the harrowing number 3, we delve into a primordial horror, a monstrous act that echoes through the very foundations of the cosmos. Cronus, king of the Titans and father of the Olympian gods. When we talk about bad husbands, Zeus's chronic infidelity often feels like a minor inconvenience, a mere peccadillo compared to what Cronus did. Cronus didn't just cheat on his wife, Rhea. He quite literally consumed their children. One by one, a relentless, systematic act of terror that defied all natural order. Cronus, himself a parricide who violently overthrew his father Uranus, was plagued by a terrifying, inescapable prophecy. One of his own children was destined to depose him, just as a cycle of cosmic violence, a familial curse that clung to his very being. And what was his solution to this chilling premonition? Not to defy fate through wisdom or negotiation, not to seek alternative paths, but through brute, horrifying prevention, an act of pure, unadulterated primal fear and cannibalism. Each time Rhea bore a child, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon, Cronus, without a shred of remorse, would snatch the newborn from her arms, a fresh life, and swallow it whole. A living tomb for his offspring, a grotesque solution to a perceived threat, turning the act of birth into a ritual of consumption. Imagine Rhea's unfathomable agony, the brief, fleeting joy of childbirth, immediately followed by the unspeakable terror of seeing her husband, her partner, the father of her children, devour her beloved infants before her very eyes. This wasn't a moment of fleeting passion or a lapse in judgment. This was a systematic, calculated campaign of terror against his own family, driven by an all-consuming paranoid fear and a root. What kind of husband inflicts such unspeakable, repeated trauma on his wife? Not just the immense loss of her children, but the horrifying spectacle of their grotesque consumption. The constant dread of each successive pregnancy, the utter helplessness as she watched life after life vanish down his throat. Zeus, for all his faults, never devoured his children, though he did swallow Metis, his first wife, to prevent a prophecy about a son who would depose him, but not after she gave birth. And he later gave birth to Athena from his head. Cronus's actions are a primal scream of fear and cruelty, an act of cannibalism against his own blood, and an unparalleled violation of the marital and parental bond. His wife, Rhea, was not just neglected or cheated on, she was subjected to an ongoing nightmare, a horrifying ritual of birth and consumption that tore her soul limb from limb. Her wails of grief and despair must have echoed through the nascent cosmos, unheard, unheeded, swallowed by the void, just as her children were. The suspense built with each pregnancy, each birth, each Rhea driven to the brink of despair, Her heart shattered into 1,000 pieces, finally sought help from her primordial parents, Gaia and Uranus. They conspired to save her sixth child when Zeus was born. Rhea, with desperate cunning, presented Cronus with a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. The Titan, in his ravenous paranoia, his mind clouded by fear, swallowed it without a second thought, convinced he had devoured his destined overthrower. But fate, as always, cannot be so easily cheated. Zeus grew up in secret, nurtured by nymphs and a goat, hidden away in a cave on Crete. When he was old enough, imbued with divine strength, he returned, forced his father to vomit up his siblings. First the stone, then the fully grown gods, and thus began the Titanomachy, the cosmic war that ultimately saw Cronus overthrown and imprisoned in the deepest abyss of Tartarus. Cronus's fear-driven cannibalism, his profound betrayal of Rhea's motherhood and their shared progeny, makes him not just a bad husband, but a figure of pure, unadulterated terror, an architect of cosmic horror. He didn't just break his wife's heart. He shattered her soul into 1,000 pieces, making him a chilling, unforgettable entry at number 3. Prepare yourselves for number 2, a figure whose cruelty wasn't cosmic, but painfully, viscerally human, a chilling tale from the mist-shrouded lands of Celtic myth. We leave the grand stage of Greek mythology for the ancient, evocative traditions of the Welsh Mabinogion. Our contender, Matholwch, King of Ireland, and husband to the beautiful, noble, and ultimately tragic Branwen. While Zeus might parade his numerous lovers and infuriate Hera with his divine indiscretions, Matholwch practiced a brutal, humiliating, and systematic form of domestic abuse that would make the king of Olympus blanch in disgust. Branwen, sister of the mighty Welsh High King Bran the Blessed, was given in marriage to Matholwch, King of Ireland, to forge a powerful political alliance between their two, a union sealed with grand feasting, ceremony, and the promise of peace and prosperity. But almost immediately, the marriage was poisoned by a single act of petty, unforgivable disrespect. Branwen's half-brother Ephnizion, a man of volatile temper and vicious impulses, felt deeply insulted by the wedding arrangements. In a fit of uncontrolled rage, he mutilated Matholwch's horses, fey-docking their tails, ears, and eyelids. A grave insult indeed, one that threatened to shatter the fragile alliance. High King Bran quickly intervened, offering rich compensation and even a magical cauldron that could restore the dead to life, hoping to mollify the enraged Irish king. For a moment, peace seemed to be precariously restored, the storm averted. But an insult, especially one to a king's honor, festers like a venomous, unhealing wound. Matholwch, consumed by simmering resentment, by a petty, vindictive rage that simmered beneath his royal facade, waited. He waited until Bran had returned to Britain, until he had Branwen isolated, vulnerable, and far from her powerful family in Ireland. Then the true horror began. He subjected Branwen to unspeakable cruelty, a sustained campaign of degradation that sought to utterly annihilate her spirit. He stripped her of her royal status, forcing her to work in the palace kitchens, enduring the daily grind and indignity of a common scullery maid, her royal robes replaced by rough, stained garments, but that wasn't enough to satisfy his festering malevolence. Every single day, the king's butcher, a loyal enforcer of Matholwch's cruel will, would come and strike her across the face. A repeated, public humiliation, a systematic degradation designed not just to physically harm, but to utterly break her spirit, to punish her for an insult not even her own, transforming her into a living symbol of his petty revenge. This wasn't a moment of uncontrolled anger, a spontaneous outburst in a fit of pique. This was deliberate, sustained torture, day after agony. Imagine the daily terror, the crushing anticipation of the blow, the complete erosion of dignity, the profound isolation from her homeland and her loving family. Zeus's affairs might cause his wives distress, might fill them with divine jealousy and wrath, but they were never subjected to such direct, physical, and publicly orchestrated abuse by him. Matholwch's actions are a chilling testament to the banality of evil. A husband's calculated cruelty aimed at utterly destroying his wife's self-worth and spirit, reducing her to less than nothing. He didn't just betray her, he enslaved her, brutalized her, and made her a living monument to his petty, festering rage, a testament to his own monstrous insecurity. For 3 long, agonizing years, Branwen endured this living hell, silenced, battered, physically and emotionally broken, seemingly forgotten by the world. But her spirit, though battered, was not entirely extinguished. Resourcefulness, born of sheer desperation, sparked within her. She tamed a starling, a small, unassuming bird, painstakingly teaching it to speak a few words, and tied a letter describing her torment, her desperate plea for rescue, to its leg. The bird, a tiny messenger of hope, flew across the vast, tumultuous Irish Sea, carrying her desperate message to her brother Bran. The tension escalates to a breaking point. Bran, upon receiving the message, assembled a mighty host, a formidable army of Britons, and sailed to Ireland to rescue his beloved sister, leading to one of the most devastating, bloody wars in all of Celtic mythology. The war itself was a cataclysm, a senseless slaughter with few survivors, a tragic outcome born directly from Matholsh's unforgivable cruelty to his innocent queen. His actions didn't just ruin a marriage, they plunged 2 nations into a bloody, ruinous conflict, costing countless lives, including those of the kings themselves. Matholsh's vindictive abuse, his calculated, prolonged torment of his wife, makes him a true monster, a husband whose evil transcends mere infidelity and plunges into the abyss of psychological and physical torture. He didn't just lose his wife, he lost his kingdom, his life, and plunged his entire world into chaos, all for the satisfaction of petty revenge against his innocent queen. This makes him truly horrific, solidifying his spot at number 2. And now we arrive at the apex of marital mismanagement, the Grand Master of insidious neglect and strategic sacrifice, earning him the undisputed. You might be surprised, you might even disagree, but hear me out, because it is not Zeus, it is Odin, the All-Father King of Asgard, the very embodiment of wisdom, war, and magic in Norse mythology. Zeus's numerous affairs were often driven by raw, impulsive desire. They caused Hera immense pain, yes, but they were almost, in a twisted way. You knew where you stood with Zeus. He was a cheat, a lecher, predictable in his passions. But Odin's betrayals are far more complex, more profound, and arguably far more devastating for his primary wife, Frigg, because they strike at the core of their shared existence and the very future of the cosmos. Frigg, the esteemed queen of Asgard, is the goddess of foresight, marriage, and motherhood. She alone shares Odin's high throne, actually Felf, and she possesses secret knowledge, the fate of all things, the inexorable march towards Ragnarök. Yet, crucially, she rarely interferes. This is key to understanding Odin's unique brand of marital depravity. For all his relentless quest for knowledge, his ceaseless wanderings across the 9 realms, his insatiable pursuit of power and wisdom, Odin often leaves Frigg to shoulder the crushing, agonizing burden of foreknowledge. She is the silent observer of his machinations, the quiet keeper of a doomed future, while he actively, and often cold-heartedly, accelerates events towards that very doom. Odin's defining characteristic is his relentless, almost manic pursuit of knowledge and power, often at any cost, regardless of the personal toll. He sacrificed an eye for profound wisdom at Mimir's well. He hung himself on the cosmic tree Yggdrasil for 9 days and 9 nights, pierced by his own spear, to learn the ancient runes and unlock their secrets. These are heroic, self-sacrificial acts for himself, for his own enlightenment, but they set a chilling precedent for how he treats those closest to him when the stakes are high, when knowledge or power is the ultimate prize. His marital infractions aren't just about simple infidelity, though he has his share of consorts and children across the realms, often conceived through cunning or force, siring powerful gods like Thor with Jefefe Earth and Vefe Gar with the giantess Ger. This alone would vex any wife, divine or mortal. But his deeper, more insidious failing lies in his profound emotional distance, his strategic manipulation of fate, and his willingness to sacrifice his family, even his beloved, light-filled son Balder, for the greater, often ambiguous, cosmic plan of Ragnar Fake, the twilight of the gods. Frigg, with her prophetic sight, knew Balder's doom was approaching. In her despair, she extracted an oath from almost everything in the cosmos. Fire, water, iron, all metals, stones, earths, trees, diseases, beasts, birds, venom, serpents, not to harm her radiant son. Yet Odin, in his constant search for deeper truths, for a complete understanding of the inevitable, allowed the one loophole in the seemingly insignificant mistletoe to remain unsworn. Did he subtly, indirectly, even orchestrate the events that led to Balder's death by Loki's hand, using the mistletoe as the fatal arrow? Many sagas suggest his complicity, his desire to fully comprehend fate, to test its limits. In doing so, he allowed the very fabric of his family to be torn asunder, forcing Frigg to endure the ultimate sorrow of a mother losing her son, knowing it was coming, powerless to stop it because of her husband's grander, colder designs. This isn't about passion or lust. It is about a cold, calculating detachment, a prioritized ambition that trumps marital fidelity. He burdens Frigg with knowledge she cannot use, forces her to watch as prophecies unfold, and often seems to be more of an orchestrator of tragic events than a protector of his home. His affairs are less about love or desire, and more about power, lineage, or the acquisition of information. His neglect of Frigg isn't just about being physically absent. It is about being profoundly emotionally unavailable, constantly preoccupied with the doom that he himself often seems to hasten, leaving her to bear the crushing weight of their shared, terrible future alone. He is the ultimate absent father and distant husband who, despite his immense power and wisdom, failed to protect his family from the very fate he obsessed over because he prioritized his own intellectual journey above all else. The culmination of Odin's marital failings isn't a single act but a lifetime of strategic distance, a cosmic indifference that left Frigg isolated in her sorrow, knowing the inevitable destruction of their world and the loss of their children, including Balder, the brightest of them all. While Zeus might infuriate, Odin's constant chilling manipulation, his willingness to sacrifice family for abstract knowledge, and the profound silent suffering he inflicts upon Frigg through his grand selfish designs makes him a husband whose depravity is not in what he does faintify his wife directly, but in what he allows to happen around her and the crushing burden he places upon her soul, knowing that he could have changed it. He is the architect of his own family's doom, all while his queen watches in helpless agony. For this cold, calculating, and ultimately devastating form of marital neglect and strategic sacrifice, Odin stands alone, the undisputed worst husband in all of mythology. So there you have it, our top 5 worst husbands in mythology. From Jason's callous, calculating abandonment that ignited a terrible vengeance, to Agamemnon's horrific, self-serving child sacrifice that forever stained his house, Cronus's primordial, fear-driven cannibalism that defied the very laws of nature, Matholsh's brutal, systematic abuse that plunged 2 nations into war, and finally, Odin's cold, calculating neglect and strategic doom, weaving that left his queen burdened with unbearable knowledge. Each one, in their own terrifying way, transcends the simple, albeit rampant, infidelity of Zeus. These aren't just ancient tales spun for entertainment. They're stark, powerful reflections of human nature amplified to epic, divine proportions. They show us the insidious power of fear, of unchecked ambition, of bitter jealousy, and of an utter, chilling disregard for those we claim to love, for those we are sworn to protect. They teach us that betrayal comes in many forms, some far more devastating, far more soul-crushing than a momentary lapse of lust. A husband's actions can shatter not just a heart, but an entire family, ignite a kingdom, ending war, or even unravel the very fabric of existence itself. Which of these mythological monsters do you think is truly the worst? Did we miss someone even more despicable? A husband whose actions defy even these depths of depravity? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this journey through the dark side of divine matrimony as fascinating and chilling as we did, please hit that like button to show your support. And for more deep dives into the epic, twisted, and often terrifying world of mythology, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next adventure into the unknown. That is all for today's video. If you like this video, please subscribe, like it, and support us. Thank you for watching.